Hello and welcome back. With the eyes of the world focused on China for the Olympic Games, unity among its 56 ethnic groups is the mantra for the Chinese government these days. But the Olympics have also provided a platform for separatist groups, like the Uyghur, an Islamic group from China's far western province of Xinjiang. They want to establish an independent Islamic state called East Turkestan. The Chinese government says the group is the biggest threat to the Games.
1 week from the Olympics, attacks against policemen in the western Islamic province of Xinjiang and in Kunming city in central China were a well-timed signal from the militant Turkistan Islamic Party. This video, allegedly released by them, warned visitors to stay away from China and the Olympic Games. The Chinese government claims these militants are backed by Al-Qaeda. Since the days of Mao Zedong, Professor Charles Burton has had numerous Canadian diplomatic postings in China.
The Chinese government got the United States to recognize the East Turkestan independence movement, which is a movement of Uyghurs in Xinjiang who would like to have their own independent state, classified as a terrorist organization. The Chinese want the global community to believe that indigenous independentist movements are actually allied to transnational Muslim terrorist organizations. But we don't have evidence that this is genuinely the case.
That accusation sparked concern among other Chinese Islamic leaders. China has more than 20 million Muslims, most of them living in western and central China. They are ethnically Chinese and are known as Hui Muslims. After suffering decades of state repression, they have managed to build a flourishing Islamic life within China. Their fear now is that the recent attacks by the ethnically separate Uyghur Muslims of the West may jeopardize that progress.
We believe these groups should treasure our precious, peaceful society that has not been gained easily. In the words of the sages, a Muslim should love his country. This is part of his belief. Whether or not our country is prosperous or stable is important to every Muslim.
The authorities want to be assured that the mosques are not being used for anything but purely religious purposes. So they're concerned about how the imams speak on non-religious issues, interpretations of the Quran that might have implications for contemporary politics. So for the most part, they have to be careful to stick to the texts and not try and create any kind of separate ethnic identity.
Ningxia is an autonomous Islamic province in western central China. It lies within the mountainous Gobi Desert on the old Silk Road. More than 1,000 years ago, Muslim merchants from Arabia and Persia came here on their way to China's heartland, bringing their trade goods and their religion. Hassan Yang Faming is Imam of the Shanguku Mosque. He's also chairman of the XINJIAN Islamic Association. As a prominent religious leader, he is carefully monitored by the authorities in Beijing.
A sentence in Quran says, you should stay away from separation and branches. What does this sentence mean? It means we are believers, we shall be united together and never think about departing in small gangs of 3 or 5 people, which could make us easy prey for wolves.
But that interpretation is not accepted by the Uyghur Muslims of China's far western province of Xinjiang. Rabia Kedar is the president of the World Uyghur Congress. She was granted political asylum in the United States, and she campaigns from Washington for human rights in Xinjiang. Rabia claims that 17,000 Uyghurs have recently been arrested, and that Chinese authorities have stepped up executions of Uyghur political activists.
I understand the Uyghurs and Chinese policies very well. Since 9/11, the government is using the global war on terror as an excuse to justify its illegitimate policies to eradicate Uyghur people.
Human rights for China.
Human rights for China.
Rabia was arrested in 1999 for her political activism in Xinjiang, where she was lobbying for an independent Uyghur state. The Uyghurs are not ethnically Chinese like the Hui Muslims in central China. Rabia was freed in 2005 following considerable pressure from the Bush administration. Her two sons are still imprisoned in China. Rabia's efforts in the United States have forced the Americans to make a distinction between her movement and alleged terror groups.
That organization doesn't seem to be supporting terrorism, but is simply a legitimate political organization of people who desire independence for a certain region of China.
But for many millions of Chinese Muslims living in nearby regions, the fear is that such separatist movements could make the Chinese government return to previous restrictions on Islamic worship.
East Turkistan activists not only have broken the national law, but also betrayed Islamic doctrine. For example, in Islam, to kill one person is like killing humankind. To save a life is like saving the whole human race. So what they have done is not consistent with Islamic doctrine. According to what we have seen, these activities were used by anti-government groups in disguise of a religious flag to break the country's laws and harm national unity.
For Hassan Yang Faming, these seminary students will carry Islam into the future. For the Imam, there has never been a better time to be a Muslim in China.
The majority of Muslims in China agree that it's currently a golden age for religious belief. The national government has implemented policies to benefit and support farmers. Educational fees have been wiped out totally. It means development has benefited the common people. We feel strongly about that. We should grasp the chance to develop and make the country more prosperous.
Beginning in 1978, Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping gradually eased some of the restrictions on Islam. Since then, imams like Hassan Yang Faming have gently opened the door on religious freedom.
There are 38,000 mosques in China and 4,200 mosques in Ningxia. Our country's leaders have now matured concerning religious policy. The government has said that religious people and believers are a constructive force in economic and social development, and our contributions should be encouraged. The country now believes in us and trusts us.
To mark the opening of the Olympics, Rabia Kedar staged a vigil in front of the White House. She wants the United States and others to exert more political leverage on China to allow the Uyghurs to secede from China and establish an independent state. She believes China is ruling its Muslims by pitting them against each other. Hui against Uyghur.
The Chinese government supports Hui Muslims and brought many of them into our homeland, creating an autonomous prefecture. Many of those who work for China's security are Hui Muslims.
The big question remains, how will the Chinese government approach its Muslims after the Olympic torch is doused?
There's a kind of ambiguous attitude towards it, but at present I think the situation for Muslims in China is the best that it's been since 1949 in terms of the ability of people to profess their faith freely and to attend religious services free of harassment. But it is not legal to propagate religion. In terms of political aspects, because the Chinese Communist Party is the sole route to any kind of political power in China, and because the Chinese Communist Party will only admit atheists to the party, it means that Muslims in China are effectively defranchised from political empowerment.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's programme. Remember that if you have any thoughts about the films you've seen, we'd love to hear from you. Our address, aljazeera.net/English. Until next time, bye-bye.